Welcome everyone to MSP200. We are here for our fall debates. Our first topic that we have in our first debate today would focus on media regulation. On the right side of me here, I have Shalea and Jessica on the pro-for side. And then here on the left side of me, I have Eric and Ethan on the con-against side. Their arguments will focus on whether regulation is ineffective and if it violates the freedom of speech. So we're going to start off here on my right side with Shalea and Jessica with their arguments and opening statements. And you have 6 minutes. You're on the clock starting now.
All right. According to a Pew Research Center survey conducted in 2020, about 64% of Americans say social media has a negative effect on the way things are going in the country today. Those who have a negative view of the impact of social media mention misinformation and the hate and harassment they see on social media. Social media is the mecca for being able to reach and influence the masses at an alarming rate with little to no effort. It takes a simple repost, a comment, picture, and/or video for information to spread like wildfire on a global level. According to The Guardian, thousands of videos, memes, GIFs, and other content promote Islamist beheading videos, neo-Nazi material advocating for Jews to be gassed, and etc. As a result, social media has become the primary target place to conduct information warfare, resulting in the spread or exchange of dis or misinformation. Terrorists and extremists use social media to their benefit by creating fake profiles to infiltrate, misguide, gather, and organize the masses, which gives rise to the development of extremist propaganda seen in the coronavirus and the claim that the vaccination is ineffective, or domestic terrorism as we see with the Kyle Rittenhouse case. Therefore, Shalea and I feel it is necessary for the government to implement regulations on social media so that we may all come to a place of law and order. Allowing the government to regulate media would give them the power to monitor potential threats to homeland security. This is best exemplified in the case of Donald Trump and the riot earlier this year at the Capitol. After a series of tweets from Donald Trump rallying his supporters, telling them to be wild, they went on to attack the building, resulting in the injury of hundreds, some police officers dead, and stealing important confidential information that had no business being in the hands of a regular person. Following the events, Twitter, along with Snapchat, completely banned his profiles, while Facebook and Instagram left him suspended. The point is, restricting and deleting those accounts ensured that Trump would no longer be able to use these platforms to encourage harmful behavior. Politically polarized media isn't a new issue, but the kind of hyper-individualized polarization made possible, and indeed made inevitable by current social media models, poses a uniquely dangerous threat. This is only one problem that we're facing currently with social media, but it can get worse. However, if we allow the government to step in, we can prevent the next violent act and possibly save a life.
Okay, so again, as just mentioned, the internet is by no means the root cause of terrorism, but it certainly has proven to be an amplifier and conveyor belt for the hatred and violence. With that, we also believe that we do have proposals for how we can kind of work to maybe address some of these things. So basically, we are looking to identify troll accounts and any accounts that may seem disruptive or may pose a threat to homeland security. And we believe that these platforms should work with us to label them the same way that you would label maybe a celebrity account or a public figure account with a blue check mark. So we want to be able to identify so you don't feel as though that we are literally watching everybody, because I believe that was one of the issues when we previously discussed it, that you feel like, oh, we're watching everyone. We're not trying to watch everyone. We're just trying to focus more so on the ones who may pose a threat. It's kind of one of those things where it's kind of like, if you knew that the next terrorist used Facebook to interact with or recruit someone to maybe get a visa, temporary visa to come over here and then infiltrate, or I'm sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? Conduct the next big terrorist attack on the United States, and they didn't do anything about it. Facebook didn't do anything about it. How would you feel if you knew that we could step in, maybe prevent that person from? Because you can't. You can look at terms and community guidelines and say, hey, if they if they violate it, then we can address it. But the terrorists at that time would not be violating just by communicating with someone in the United States. So if we knew that this person was maybe a potential threat or something like that, then we could have prevented that person from going a step further and maybe accessing that U.S. or trying to meet up with a woman and date her to use that as a way to get into the United States to plan this attack. So with that, we're just asking more so for like just access. We don't want to really censor. That's not our goal. Our goal is not to censor. Our goal is to be able to monitor and just research. At the end of the day, if you really look at it, you guys, social media is the one that's censoring. You have the ability to remove and delete and take away things from social media. You ban your community users. We don't do that. We want you to be able to say what you want to say, so we can know who our target is, or our threat, or a potential threat to Homeland Security is. So with that, we're just asking, for that reason, we think it is imperative that we regulate social media, and taking immediate action would prevent the next domestic terrorist act or save a citizen's life. And that's in all aspects. So we want you to be able to decide. It's up to you. What do you think we should do?
All right, now we will have clarifying questions from our con team. You have 3 minutes to ask Shalaya and Jessica any clarifying questions to their argument. So you're on the clock starting now.
So I guess my first question is, you say that your goal is not to censor, but it appears to me that they have already chosen to censor and have censored a lot more right-wing people than they have left-wing people for the same things. Like the leader of the Proud Boys, Gavin McInnes, which is a violent right-wing group, was banned from Twitter. But Antifa, which has groups in pretty much every city in the United States, was allowed to stay on Twitter despite being significantly more violent. So what will you do to address those concerns?
Okay, so let me just make a correction. We didn't ban them from Twitter. We don't have access to ban them from Twitter. You guys, platform, banned them from Twitter. That is your private...
I didn't ban them.
Okay, well, social media chose to ban them from Twitter. So with that, again, we don't want to... If you can repeat the last end of that question one more time. Sorry, go ahead.
Like how will you like implement this without censoring certain people's viewpoints more than other people's viewpoints, or without censoring certain violent content, without censoring censoring similar violent content from a different political?
Okay, so as mentioned before, we want to work with Twitter. We don't want them to ban the accounts. We want to work with them. We want them to label these accounts as a possible threat. And again, it could be something, again, like I said, if it's a celebrity account, they have blue check marks or the little wings or whatever. We want something on their account that says, hey, they might be a potential threat. So it could be a red check mark. It could be an orange dot. We don't care what it is, but we want something that we can know that they might be a threat. And we don't want to take away whatever it is they're saying, because we need to know what they're planning. So if we've taken away and we're censoring that, then that's not going to help us with the bigger plan.
So,
all right, we have time for one more clarifying question.
So would Donald Trump get one of these red check marks to signify that he's violent and promotes violence under your rules?
I think, to my personal opinion, first of all, we wouldn't censor our own. He would be, we're for it. We're the government. That would be like banning one of our own. So we wouldn't do that. I do think, yes, at the end of the day, if he has an own private account, like he does now, since he's not the president anymore, since he's a former president, absolutely, he would get one as well.
A red check?
Yes, yeah. Yes, a red check, orange check, or whatever the case is. Once you are not a government official, we believe that the same terms and everything should apply.
So would Kamala Harris get a red check too for bailing rioters out of jail on Twitter?
For bailing who? Rioters
out of jail on Twitter and Facebook?
I mean, if everyone felt as though that it was a situation where they are harmful, I mean, we're asking you to...
So how do you determine which one is and isn't?
Okay, so we're asking you to abide by the same normal, everyday First Amendment, and that is to basically not cause harm, no obscenity, no hateful speech.
All right, everyone, that's time. So now let's go over to our no team. You have 6 minutes for your opening statements and arguments, and you're on the clock starting now.
So social media and internet regulation by both media platforms and the government is unnecessary and ineffective, as well as an affront to our First Amendment rights as citizens. Throughout history, the government has played on the fear of citizens to make them willingly give up their freedoms for their own protection by making a boogeyman out of those who are different. I believe that media regulation infringes on our First Amendment rights. I believe this because I feel as though media regulation would involve everybody being regulated, and everybody would not have the right to post their opinions and what they would like to post without the fear of being regulated and being banned or being banned from a platform itself. A prime case is Donald Trump. He would post, things throughout the election that got banned, got taken down, and eventually got his account banned. I believe that regulating social media will not stop crimes or fake news from spreading. If we compare the social media to the world, we can say that crime still happens in the world even though there are police and laws. So the same thing goes for social media. If it was regulated, people would still commit crimes, and it wouldn't stop crimes and the issues going on in the world today. So yeah, everybody should have the right to post their political opinions and other opinions and things that they want to say on social media without the fear of having it taken down. I look at social media as basically a public meeting space behind a screen. You can say whatever you want outside within reason. You should be able to say the same thing on the platform itself.
Throughout the years, the government has promised to protect us in exchange for our rights. The first major internet-based implication of this was post 9/11, when the younger President Bush used the tragedy of the terrorist attack of 9/11 as a political tool to spy on American citizens through their internet devices by passing the completely unnecessary Patriot Act. He did this by preying on the fears of an America united against terrorists to pass a deeply unpopular and unconstitutional affront to our freedoms, which would have never been passed but for deception. For the first time since the 70s, when the FBI used its power to infiltrate anti-war protest groups, as well as spreading hallucinogenic drugs throughout the protests, the government would be monitoring its citizens under a veil of secrecy. Despite having no evidence that a lack of surveillance or intelligence was responsible for 9/11, Bush played on the public's fear of another 9/11 style attack and tricked them into a short-sighted Patriot Act, which did not stop a single terrorist attack on the country in the 20 years since its implementation. In 2021, the government was unable to stop Ethan Crumley from going into school with a gun and opening fire until he had killed 4 classmates. While many will use this as a tool to pass increased surveillance laws or restrict guns, the reality is that the situation was already preventable and was simply not acted upon by the school, social media platforms, or police. The school had already received notice of a drawing of blood and bullets, complaints from students, and there were even social media posts of disturbing images as well as his gun. The reason that this is important is the same reason the Patriot Act is unnecessary, and that is because both were already preventable and simply not acted upon. The CIA, FBI, and the NSA all had more than enough data between them to have successfully identified and stopped the attacks beforehand. They simply failed to share and act on the information, which I would guess is because there are always too many false flags out there to successfully identify real threats over the internet. Interestingly enough, the FBI and Twitter also had enough data to prevent the January 6th Stop the Steal protest from becoming a violent riot, which at this point I should point out how that was used to boot Trump from Twitter and has been pushed by politicians and platforms as a reason to farther control the internet, as they promise to protect you from hate speech. This hate speech or violent speech was already incredibly easy to monitor and could have been used in potentially calling a bigger police presence to prevent the riot from even happening, but the FBI wasn't unable to even scour Twitter successfully, which was perhaps partially due to Twitter taking down many of the violent comments from those who had posted them shortly after they had posted them. If the government agencies already have the power and scope to prevent threats, there are 2 questions we must ask. Does the government sometimes allow or even encourage these attacks to happen in order to give themselves more money and power? And two, have we already reached a point where we cannot successfully lower the number of attacks and hate planned on social media?
All right, now we move on to our clarifying questions. The pro team will ask the con team any clarifying questions they have. You're 3 minutes, and you're on the clock starting now.
What was your question, Jess?
You can go first.
I didn't have a question at this time.
I guess my question was for Eric. Could you say what you said in the beginning about like laws? I think you said the government plays on something. Could you repeat that?
I mean, I was saying that the let's see here. Like the government played on the fears of its citizens to make them willingly give up their freedoms. What am I looking at? So, but Bush basically played on the public's fears of 9/11 and tricked them into the Patriot Act, which got created. I don't know if that really answers your question.
And the Patriot Act was basically it spies on everyone's phones. It gives the government the access to your phones, and with all that access through phones, social medias, even stuff like Gmail, if that counts as social media, then they've used that, and with all that data, there hasn't been one terrorist attack that they've managed to stop in 20 years of time since it was passed.
So, I mean, let's think about it. You may have maybe a couple, I mean, how many billions of people is it in the world? We're trying to, we want to be realistic. We're not trying to stop crime. We're trying to reduce any serious attacks. Have we had any serious attacks like 9/11 since then? Have we had any major serious attacks since 9/11?
I don't think we've had any as bad, but we've had violent events like the protests.
Right, so the protests and school shootings and stuff like that. Yeah. So it comes down to, again, being able to identify. So I think we are in agreement that we don't want to censor people. I think you mentioned that, Eric, that you don't want us to censor people. Like you said, Ethan, Twitter at one point did take away or remove some of the posts that prevented us from maybe acting on possible threats. And that is what we don't want. We want it to be and work together with social media so that they leave it up so we can identify, so we can follow to be able to prevent in the future. And that is really the goal here, because we know.
So no new arguments, just a question here.
Okay.
Any other questions for Ethan or Eric?
No.
All right. So let's go ahead and move on here. We're going to go to our rebuttals, all right? Each team has 3 minutes, okay? For the rebuttal, we're going to start with the Yes Pro team. Remember, you cannot present any new arguments during this time, all right? Shalaya and Jessica, you're on the clock, starting now.
This is counter argument?
I don't know where we at, sorry. Okay, media regulation does not equate to media censorship. As we mentioned before, we are asking that you abide by the same First Amendment regulations offline, online, as in online. Again, that would, I think I answered this earlier, Ethan, that would be avoiding hate speech, misinformation, obscenity, and harassment. If a user believes they are unable to do so, then we honestly feel like you shouldn't be obligated to use this space. So therefore, social media is a choice, is a privilege, is not necessary. It's not your right to inhabit a space on those platforms because they are all owned by private companies. When you sign up for a social media account, you agree to terms and conditions, and if you violate those stipulations, you can be suspended or even permanently removed from sites altogether. And that was stated by Fuller in the Know Your Rights with Freedom of Speech on Social Media. So that goes back to Donald Trump. I know, people tend to be upset about us or about Donald Trump being removed from social media, but at the end of the day, if you can't follow laws online, then you're 9 times out of 10 not going to follow the laws of the land offline. And that way you are more likely, as a result, you are more likely to be viewed as a criminal or more likely serve as a bigger threat to society. Again, we're not asking you guys to look for or remove content or look for any possible threats, because we know that social media too, your primary goal is to entertain and look for monetary gain through advertisement and creator content. We don't expect you to be able to identify a home security threat, whereas though we can. And as mentioned, we just want to be able to label them so we can really focus on those that remain a threat. There should be no tolerance to incite harm to others or a place for extremists or terrorists to recruit and misform others. Social media is supposed to be and act as an escape for the harsh realities of everyday life. We understand that you guys have terms and community guidelines that your users need to adhere to, but those guidelines and terms are not in violation if someone is just networking, and that's where most terrorists and extremists start, by just networking. For that reason, we truly feel as though it is imperative that we regulate social media. And just by doing that, we do feel like we can reduce the crime, even though it was mentioned that we do not. But if we're being honest, we need to hone in on those by first identifying. So we have to identify before we can hone in.
All right, so now we move to the con. No team. You have 3 minutes for your rebuttal/counter argument, and you're on the clock starting now.
The greatest problem when it comes to allowing social media companies to regulate speech and hate speech is deciding which speech is not a crime, but should still be taken down. Across the class in the United States, we have strong disagreements about what speech is acceptable or what would be considered rude, and this only differs stronger across the world, where one would have a tough time convincing the patriotic Chinese government backing Chinese citizens that the Muslims deserve to live outside of a slave camp. On the Meta website, formerly known as Facebook, it says that speech calling of those of a certain sexual orientation disgusting, hate speech that would not be allowed on its platform. Well, we probably all agree it would be rude to say that, but it also does not define every potential time someone uses disgusting to describe a sexual orientation. For example, had someone called a male pedophile disgusting because he had raped a young boy, this technically would meet Meta's criteria of bannable hate speech, even though it's very fair and popular opinion that a pedophile is disgusting regardless of what the sexual orientation of those involved are.
Moreover, Meta and Twitter were not very successful at deciding what to censor fairly without choosing a favored political opinion. When Jack Dorsey and his lawyer made an appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast to talk with Tim Pool, it was made clear that while they have guidelines for what they will censor, that these guidelines are in complete unison with the left side of the aisle, while completely ignoring what those on the right want. Rogan pointed out that Gavin McInnes and members of the Proud Boys, an often violent right-wing group, and its leader, were banned from the app, while left-wing domestic terrorist group, Antifa, had much more traffic and following, but was allowed to stay on the app. Tim Pool reminded them that Meghan Murphy had had tweets removed for stating the fact that men aren't women, in reference to debate on trans issues about whether men born with penises should be allowed to play in women's sports or use women's locker rooms. Despite this opportunity to learn from historical occurrences of the government using people's fears to take away our rights, bringing us one step closer to an authoritarian and surveillance state, we sit at the same place today that we were 20 years ago, which is a place where establishment politicians promise they can protect us from illness by taking away our rights to decide what health care we need and giving these rights to them. Politicians promising to protect our oppressed from hate speech on the internet if you just give them total control of it. And politicians promising to protect our fellow citizens from harm if you just give them your gun to protect you. Social media companies have shown themselves incapable of fairly implementing these rules.
All right, now we move to our conclusion. We will start with the pro-for team to give why they felt their argument is the best, and then we'll move on to the no-con team as to why they felt their argument was the best. 3 minutes apiece, all right? And you're on the clock starting now.
I'll start off. So at the end of the day, you know, our country is just getting more hostile. There's the political polarization. There's increased racial tension. We've seen a lot of hate crimes, you know, especially in Philadelphia in the past couple of weeks. And we just feel that with social media, we need to have a place where we feel safe, like Shalaya said earlier. It's a place where we're supposed to stay connected. It's a place where we talk with our friends. It's not a place where we should worry about people grouping together to try to take out a group of people, or to just, again, have, you know, that increased tension online. That's just not the place where it's supposed to be. So we just feel that it's time for the government to step in and take away, like Twitter, and Facebook, them having control over it. We would step in and make sure that it is equal, and that, you know, regardless if you're left wing or right wing, that you're being monitored if you do pose a threat to anyone in our country. So yeah, we feel like it's the best because we just want to protect everyone at the end of the day.
I think we have a ton of, I mean, if we're using the coronavirus, it's a ton of misinformation out there. Someone stating their opinion cannot be seen as harmful. Okay, they're just stating their opinion. But if this person is now going from stating their opinion to gaining 20K followers in a week, and then trying to, I mean, it could be a threat to society, because here we are trying to make sure that the world is good, we are healthy, we're in a healthy state by taking the vaccination, but then you have people online who could be viewed as extremists who are trying to get the people to go against what we are here for, which is the betterment of our citizens. Being able to defer or differentiate between someone that's just stating their opinion and someone who is really just a borderline extremist would really help us to avoid possible warfare, avoid a possible civil war when it comes to racial tension, avoid a possible terrorist attack when it comes to, like you said, it could be a domestic terrorism, it could be a global terrorist attack, or a national terrorist attack. We just want to be able to have that access and ability to really filter out who was just talking and who might take action. And that's really what this is all about. It's not about trying to instill fear in our citizens for a better or grander purpose. And that's where I'll leave it.
All right, so we have 3 minutes for our con team. Ethan and Eric, you have 3 minutes and you're on the clock starting now.
So in regards to misinformation peddled over Facebook and Twitter about the vaccine and COVID, I think it's really relevant that 97% of people on according to polls, 97% of people asked about their risk of dying from the coronavirus overstated their risk of dying. So I think it's shown that the social media sites have been used as a platform for misinformation of spreading how likely you are to die from COVID. And this has caused many people to think that they're much more likely to die from COVID than they actually are, and has created a lot of hysteria in regards to it. So regulating the internet and social media platforms is very unconstitutional, as it would be a violation of freedom of speech because people can't post their opinions if Twitter or anyone then disagrees. And the person who posted it has a great risk of the post or maybe even their account being taken down. Twitter's record is incredibly spotty with this, and they have shown themselves to only really censor one side of the aisle while letting the other side run wild and making people think that they're going to die from COVID, even if they're not really at risk for COVID based on their age and like other health risks. So in order to protect from this, we must affirm the public's right to disagree and to understand that not everyone is going to agree with us. Some people will agree that we won this debate, and some people will agree they won this debate, and not everyone's going to agree with that. So internet regulation will lead to only certain viewpoints being broadcast, which will destroy the First Amendment and dissemination of ideas while simultaneously taking away our rights to disseminate information. Republicans and Democrats will never agree on whether men can be women, so it is unfair if only one half of the country is able to voice their opinions on this matter, because Twitter, without evidence, thinks that trans people will suffer harm. We all have the rights to our thoughts and opinions, and we hope for a free and fair platform where the best ideas are able to be debated and the best idea can win. Thank you, guys.
All right, everybody, let's give it up for both teams one time. So with that being said, we're going to move on to our question and answer session. We're going to have questions from the audience. If you have a question, please come up to the mic over here. You can ask or pose a question for either team, but we're going to have 15 minutes for this session. So if you have a question, come on up to the microphone here, and we can start with your question. Andrella.
So on the pro side, to clarify what you guys wanted to do with your social media, the way that you wanted to approach it, you guys wanted to put, it's kind of like the verified badges, but for people who have more of an opinion on certain topics. Is that what you were saying, that you would like to put that on their pages so when people see it, they can know that they're
so basically,
something?
So basically, we're looking for like repeat offenders who may have that, may have the ability or the power to really guide others into maybe the extremist or terrorist views. So we're not looking, okay, as soon as you say something bad, that's it. We're looking to, if you're constantly doing this and we know that it is not, you're giving wrong information, then we want to be able to label it and then just track you and see, hey, where is he taking this further or she taking this further? Are they acting on it? Are they meeting up? And then be able to, from social media, do a deeper dive as to what other plans, or are they creating or trying to plan some kind of attack. So that's really what it is. We just want to be able to label them, yes, like a badge for repeat offenders.
And so would this, as a repeat offender, would this automatically turn them into a public figure of some sort as well?
No.
Because so you're saying as a regular person to have a continuous view on a topic, they should be labeled for that and watched for their view on that topic, or their consistent view on that topic.
If it's providing misinformation that we feel would incite harm.
Okay. And for you guys, you don't want any of that at all. You believe that social media should stay the way it is, if not more free, due to the fact that it's because of biasness towards the left and the right?
I think mostly it should stay that way. I think one change that can be implemented is a stronger or more strict enforcement of Section 230, where right now you're seeing the social media companies kind of decide to be moderators, with Twitter deciding that they're going to moderate President Trump and remove him while he's still in office. I don't think that they should be able to monitor or moderate really any of that. Okay. Unless it crosses the barrier of it being a crime. I mean, if I say like I'm going to shoot you and I say that on social media, then that's a crime. I've threatened you. So I would think that should. I don't necessarily think it should be taken down. Maybe taken down after the police have like complete like history of that and like are able to present it in court. But until that can happen and it's proved that something is a crime, I think it should stay up.
So you don't.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to touch base on what Ethan said.
Yeah.
That is where we agree.
Yeah.
We don't want people to remove stuff that is mentioned. We want a Section 230 immunity.
Yeah.
We want that so we can be able to view and see, okay, this person has a pattern of stating this or threatening this person, so we might need to keep close eye.
Yeah. So on the threat part, I think we agree, but I think we still disagree very strongly on the misinformation part. So I think that there's differing opinions on really what misinformation, disinformation are. And in some things, like if I just say, like, this water bottle is red, like that is clearly wrong by all accounts. But if I say that you as a 10-year-old shouldn't take the vaccine, and then I cite some data for that, that's being taken down. You have doctors that have said that children shouldn't take it, and that's being taken down from stuff like YouTube, from Facebook, where they'll only allow one viewpoint to be broadcast on their sites.
Okay, so
I don't
you don't think a private entity should be able to take that type thing down?
No.
Correct.
But you believe a private entity should be able to label that person for saying that or as a repetitive...
Correct. We don't want them to take it down either. We want them to just label.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Thank you for you guys.
Thank you. Next question. Come on up, Melissa.
Hey guys, I'm Melissa. Is it okay? I have two questions for both sides.
Yes.
Okay, so for the pro side and forgive me if I'm being redundant here. So I understand that you want to badge different people and different entities and groups that you feel is a threat, but how would you feel, like how does simply labeling them prevent future attacks, let's just say?
Because we will monitor them more intensely.
And so you're continuously monitoring. Would any action be taken if
action
you see?
Will be taken. So let's use the coronavirus vaccination thing. So I don't know if you know, there's a guy named Intellect Extremist on IG, and he has a large, huge following who he's truly against the vaccination. He is of Muslim, he's Muslim. His religion is, he's a Muslim. And everyone feels as though that he has a bigger agenda, and that he's trying to get people to get these religious exempt forms to not take the vaccination. So when you are at this point calling for people to not have a healthy environment, you are now causing the world to spread a disease that is threatening to our society. That is where we would badge him and then follow him closely to see if he's maybe going to conduct any marches or maybe conduct any serious protests that can probably result in a civil war or some type of violent act. So that is why we want the badges to follow those people.
Okay, I understand what you're saying completely. Like, so, and I don't know if I'm overstepping, but like, at that point, if you do, like, say, for example, this person, you badge that person, you're like, this person is a potential threat. Like, would you take any further action or no? Like, to stop? Or would you, like, shut down the site at all? Or just
we would
really
definitely be present and have more visibility around the event.
Okay.
Either it could be we're known presence or presence that is undercover.
Okay.
But we would definitely be there to monitor, again, the event and make sure nothing of another nature happens or to another level.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
No, that's no problem.
And then I do have one more. And then you kind of hit on this already, which was like, how does Section 230 correlate with your position? And would you, like, say there's a lot of misinformation on a particular social media site rather than other, would you badge the entire social media site as saying, like, this one is potentially, you know, incorrect more so? Or would you just say, no, it's completely separate?
So are you saying that if a user on Twitter, would I take that badge and carry it to Facebook or Instagram? Is that what you're saying? I just want to make
somewhat, yes. So, like, say the person on like Facebook, you badge that person, and there happens to be like a majority you find like on Facebook as well that is incorrect information. Would you also badge Facebook itself, or would you just keep that separate, like Section 230 states, and completely hold the user accountable?
It would just be the user.
Okay.
Not the company or the platform itself. It would be the user.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, for the con side, sorry, I'm like shaking. All right, so how do you propose that Americans prevent crimes that are posted on social media without media regulation, and what else can we do to prevent future crimes with the information?
So in regards to the Ethan Crumbley case, which was the school shooting that happened, I think last week or the week before, so there had already been alerts to the police, the school, and parents of his social media post that were quite disturbing and like would suggest someone was a high risk of committing a crime. Despite that, nothing was done, and I believe that that's because there are so many false flags on the internet where somebody would post a gun and then not do anything. I know when I was in high school, there were certain people that actually like owned guns underage illegally, and they never shot anyone, believe it or not. But so I think monitoring the sites for that is definitely good. Like I was like for Drello's question earlier, like if I said I'm going to shoot you, like that's a crime that should be reported to police. That person should not be should be tried as a criminal, I think. So I think when a crime has been committed or something that suggests the crime is about to be committed, I think that should always go straight to the police. I think anyone that sees it has a bit of a moral responsibility to go to the police, the same way if your neighbor's house was being broken into, you would hopefully call the police. So I think it's really a moral responsibility. People that see it, if you're on the site and you see somebody saying, I'm going to go into like Montgomery County Community College and shoot it up, then that's like, that needs to be reported because people's lives are at risk.
So you are proposing more so of the users instead of
the
government?
I think the cops should monitor that for sure. Like the monitoring, like a social media, it's a public account. So I mean, if you're able to monitor that without even doing the Patriot Act or any of these phone tapping things, I think definitely go for it. And if we see crimes being committed, then react.
Okay. So, but you disagree with badging it? Like badging these users?
I think that's unfair because it comes to, I think Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are great examples for that, because you have Donald Trump who, it's a liberal opinion that he would have incited the January 6th riot by saying the election was stolen, among other things, where you then have Kamala Harris who reposted and encouraged people to donate to a fund that was working to bail rioters out of jail. People who were arrested during the BLM protests, the ones that turned into riots, not the protesters, but the people actually rioting, who were jailed for doing stuff like burning cars down, burning buildings, throwing Molotov cocktails into crowds, and really dangerous stuff like that. Where it's a good debate whether like Kamala Harris has incited violence or whether Donald Trump has incited violence. But I think most people would agree they're two very similar things. Depending on political party, people might say one is worse than the other. But I think it would be unfair if I were given the sole responsibility of doing that, or like if you were, or anyone, because everyone has biases, and I don't think it's a fair process to say that a left-wing Twitter is able to kick off Donald Trump but leave Kamala Harris on. I think that is very unfair.
Okay. I appreciate your response. And then I just have one final question. So if the pro team is suggesting that labeling potential threats of users and badges, how does that infringe on on your First Amendment rights? Technically, they're not restricting speech; they're simply just badging.
So, I think it restricts your rights in a few ways, because right now, if they did it their way, where they didn't take any of it down, which I'm not sure that they were saying that, because they seem to be suggesting that if things were being repeated, that it would then be taken down. But I could be incorrect.
I don't think. I don't think that was mentioned.
No, we don't want to remove anything.
So I think it infringes on your First Amendment because it makes you seem uncredible. It makes you seem like you're just saying something wrong. Where like Twitter's fact checker knows nothing in regards to there are doctors that have different views on the vaccines. And some doctors don't think if you're under 30 or if you're like under 20 or whatever it is that you should take the vaccine, because they think that with all there's thousands and thousands of drugs the FDA has approved and then unapproved years later, like Vioxx was one where it turned out, I think Vioxx was causing like, I forget, I could get it wrong, but I think it was like something wrong with your heart it was causing if not used correctly. So there are things that they find out years later, and there are certain doctors that suggest that the COVID vaccines may have side effects years later. And I think it's unfair that those doctors should receive a check mark where they're then doubted as doctors because some fact checker on Twitter decided that what they were saying was wrong, when the fact checker spent 15 minutes researching it and the doctor spent at least 7 years in medicine, possibly longer.
Okay. Thank you guys both. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Great questions.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today in our debate. Let's give it up one more time for our pro and con teams. All right, everyone. That's a wrap, and we'll be back for our next second debate. Thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
Good job.
Great debate, guys.